Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 318 of CryptoBiography, and I'm calling this Last. It is a complete story, so all in one episode today, and here we go. Frank woke up to an incessant, but not too loud, knock on his door. He opened his eyes and decided to give it a minute. Whoever it was would go away eventually, he thought. He thought wrong. Several minutes later, and the rapping at his bungalow's door was still continuing. "Fine, I'm coming," he said grumpily, and nowhere near loud enough for whoever it was to hear him. He was still hoping whoever it was would go away. He pulled on his shorts and slippers and shuffled towards the hall. He wasn't wearing a shirt, but really, that was a problem for whoever was banging so incessantly on his door. He got to the door, which was the kind that was just a solid front door without window or peephole. He craned his neck around the little window that ran down alongside the door. 5 zombies were banging on his front door. Of course they were zombies. That explained the unceasing, continual noise. He wondered what had brought them to his door. Maybe he'd made some noise in his sleep. Whatever the reason, he had a problem. You know what? He thought to himself. This is just it. This is just fucking it. His life had been going to shit for years. Maybe this wasn't the worst thing that could happen to him. Fuck it, he thought, and swung the door open. "What do you want?" he yelled at them, though he knew they would be non-verbal. Part of him braced for the attack. Part of him was just proud of himself for facing up to them. But the attack didn't come. As intent as they had seemingly been to knock on his door, now that it was open, and they could have attacked him, they did not. They stood almost completely still, moaning lightly. "Hello?" Frank asked, testing his earlier assumption. But they didn't say anything. They just looked at him with their dead eyes. "Okay then," Frank said. He shut the door in their face. Immediately there was a moaning, and the banging resumed on his door. He opened it up again, and they let their arms fall limp at their sides and stared at him. Not only were their roomy eyes creepy, he realized he couldn't hear them breathing. It was quite as disturbing as their appearance once he noticed it. They only breathed when they were moaning then. Or maybe they only breathed because they wanted to moan. But why weren't they attacking him? He looked around. The neighborhood was all little bungalows from the 1910s and 20s like his. He couldn't see any other people walking around, or any zombies. A hoax? But these zombies in front of him didn't seem to be a hoax, except for the fact that they weren't attacking him. Well, he thought either this is a hoax, or the end of the world has been reached. Might as well figure out which. He was wondering if other zombies would munch on him immediately. He wasn't looking forward to it. But if the world had gone to the zombies, he wasn't looking to delay things. "1 sec," he told the zombies, and stepped back inside and closed the door. They immediately resumed their moaning and knocking on the door. But he just wasn't ready to invite them in quite yet. He put on some thick clothes, though it was going to be a warm day, and instead of his usual sneakers, a pair of hiking boots. He never wore his hiking boots. They'd only been on his feet twice, and one of those times was when he bought them. He laughed a little at himself. If things went to shit, was he going to head for the mountains? He noticed for the first time that the electricity was on. Weird, he thought. It must have happened overnight, so apparently the systems were robust enough to still be going. Or perhaps someone was holed up and keeping the lights on. He tried the water in his bathroom sink. It ran, and he turned it off. He went out to the kitchen, took the largest clean container he could find, and filled it up. If the water pressure stopped, he would have to get water before that happened. The knocking was getting more urgent, and he yelled towards the door, Yeah, give me a second." It didn't change anything. He turned on his phone. It had power, of course, and it seemed to have a connection to the nearest cell tower. And it had Wi-Fi, or at least a connection to his house's router. But when he tried to find anything online, the services all seemed to have gone dark. Maybe there would be one or two still working later that he could find, or maybe the camera or the flashlight would be useful. He put the phone in his pocket. He grabbed a can of diet root beer and headed out. The zombies again quieted and fell limp as he opened the door. He didn't wait this time. He wanted to see what was going on. He walked past the zombies and out to the sidewalk. No one was visible. He looked around and listened. The city was quiet. So quiet he realized he couldn't hear any of the noises of traffic or other urban noises. The only sound he could hear was just a slight hint of wind and a bit of insect buzzing. He looked behind him. He had closed his front door out of habit, but it wasn't locked. Somehow he didn't care. The zombies had turned and followed him, and were again just behind him, within their arm's length, if they raised them, but they still stood with their arms at their sides. It was unnerving, but he started to walk again. He decided to go towards the grocery store, which was the closest thing nearby that wasn't just more houses. He kept looking around, but didn't see any more people. And really oddly, didn't see any more zombies. Maybe they've died, he thought, but that didn't explain why there were still 5 following him, and apparently only him. Maybe they've all congregated somewhere. Sure, he thought, but where were all the others? Were they all in one part of town, or going towards one part of the country? What about other continents? He thought about this, sipping on his diet root beer. He was about a block away from the grocery store. There he saw the first indications of societal problems. But they were still mild. Cars maybe not even crashed, but parked at odd angles. A strange scrape on a light pole that he knew wasn't there before. He turned the corner and could see the parking lot of the grocery store. The store itself looked more or less normal, though the sign was not lit. Then a person came into view. Another man, probably about 40, like him, was moving towards the grocery store and was now not blocked by a large van. Behind him was a group of 6 zombies, exactly like his own undead posse, following behind without attacking. The man was partly facing away from him and didn't see Frank. "Hey!" he called out. The guy turned and saw Frank. He started to raise his hand in a wave. But the zombies by the other men had heard Frank too. They turned and saw Frank. Then they turned on the other man, the one they'd been following placidly. They lunged and tore him apart. Frank was so shocked he couldn't move. He could only watch. It was over very quickly, and the zombies stood up, including their new, rather ragged member, and turned towards him. They came up to him and stopped, just placid as ever, though more than twice as numerous. What was that? Thought Frank. But something else was happening. There was a low noise, which Frank was unable to place, but it affected the zombies. They grabbed him, though they did not bite, and started to move him towards the sound. It was apparently coming from the local park. Soon he could see the park. It was a swarm of zombies. Not only was it was full in an inhuman way. Even the thickest crowd of people has space between them. Here there was no space between the zombies. They didn't need any. And the entire city must have been there in zombie form. The park was sometimes used as an 8-match soccer field, and every inch was a swarming mass of zombies. Though they were mostly quiet, there was a rasping as tattered clothes and rotting skin rubbed against each other. This sound carried in a horrible way, and was what Frank had heard but not recognized. As Frank was pushed toward the awful mass, it parted to let him through. Soon he was somewhere in the very middle. The smell was overpowering, a wall almost as solid as the bodies all around him. And as the hours passed, he understood. The zombies had one last desire, to eat. But he was the last human, and some other, small, still human part of them couldn't bear to eat the last human anywhere. So he would die, probably of starvation or thirst, in the mass of tens of thousands of zombies. The last meal. And And that's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, it's cryptobiography@gmail.com or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or Mastodon. And thanks for listening. Words and music copyright 2023, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.